Greetings from Austin, Texas. My name is Syed Akbar Haider, and I'm affiliated with the South Asia Institute here at the University of Texas at Austin. Thank you for joining me in the virtual launch of the Sajjad Zaheer Digital Archive. As we celebrate this auspicious step, not too far from our thoughts is the grief that looms on our horizons and in our cities, especially the ones in India and Pakistan. May these moments of suffering ease a little bit in the days to come. Today, through the labor of collaboration across continents, we pay tribute to the multifaceted legacy of Sayyid Sajjad Zaheer, the bridge builder par excellence, affectionately known to his comrades as Bane Bhai. His very name, for those who toiled with him to bring about a more just order for our planet, evoked a new dawn to which all of us are entitled. As his friend Faiz would say, Sabah और उसका अंदाज़े तकल्लुम सहर और उसका आगाज़े तबस्सुम. The morning breeze and his way with words, the promised dawn and the commencement of his smile. A lesser known comrade captured Zahir's legacy for all those who were inspired by his ideals. जिस्म का साज अगर टूट भी जाए ऐ दोस्त, रूह का राग नहीं मर सकता, पाब जंजीर नहीं होती बहारों की महक, लालो गुल की हंसी कैद नहीं हो सकती, वक्त सयाद तो हो सकता है, जिंदगी सैद नहीं हो सकती. Even if the instrument of the body breaks, the soul's melody cannot die, O friend. The spring's fragrance cannot be bound in chains. The laughter of the tulip and the rose cannot be imprisoned. If time can indeed be a deadly hunter, then life cannot be its prey. It is the life of this dynamic, interactive archive that we celebrate today. And thank you again for joining us. I will now go over the some sort of ground rules. I request the speakers to be respectful of time. We want to wrap this up in an hour. So please stay with the time that has been allotted to you. The program will be divided into three sections. The first one, Scott has labeled expressions of institutional support, and we will have three colleagues speaking in this one. And the first one I would like to introduce, and I'll be giving very brief introductions. The first person who will be speaking is Dennis Lighton, professor at Jindal Global University, ex-director, Center for Community Knowledge, Ambedkar University, Delhi. Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you very much. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, as the case may be. Very happy to be part of this. And I have very little to say because, truth be told, my role in bringing this project about has been very small, tiny, in fact. But I was just having a conversation with Mr. Surajit Sarkar, who is part of this program this evening. I was talking to him the other day, and he was refreshing my memory about how this project came about, what happened when, and so on. And I simply signed some papers regarding it sometime in 2017 or 2018 and handed them over to Mary and Kamran in Austin at that time. But along the way, I did have a couple of conversations about what the project was likely to be and what it involved. It seemed very interesting to me right from the beginning, although I'm not a scholar in particular of the Progressive Writers Association or even the cultural left in 20th century India. I could see right from the beginning that this was potentially a very rich project. And I'm very happy that the South Asia Institute and the University of Texas Libraries have taken the role that they have in bringing this project to fruition. And I'm very interested to hear what the various participants have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dennis. Our next speaker is Judy Aspect, Area Studies Program Manager, Center for Research Libraries. Thank you, Judy.
Greetings to everyone, and thank you so much for inviting me today. The Center for Research Libraries, known as CRL, is an international consortium of university, college, and independent research libraries. Founded in 1949, CRL supports original research and inspired teaching in the humanities, sciences, and social sciences by preserving and making available to scholars a wealth of rare and uncommon primary source materials from all world regions. CRL's deep and diverse collections are shaped by specialists at major research universities who work together to identify and preserve collections and content to ensure its long-term integrity and accessibility to researchers worldwide. CRL is so pleased to have received the Sajjad Zaheer collection, and we are committed to steward this collection for the long term. This collection of personal papers and photographs is an important base of knowledge that many scholars around the world will surely use with great interest. CRL is committed to making as much content openly accessible as possible, and we are delighted to add this material to our growing collection of open content. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Judy, and for all your support. Our next speaker is my dear friend and colleague from the University of Texas at Austin, also the director of our South Asia Institute and professor of sociology, Professor Sharmila Rudrappa. Thank you, Sharmila.
Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to meet with all of you virtually online. If Dennis claimed he had far lesser role in this, I had even smaller role in initiating this, because I just started up way after the whole initiation of the project through Kamran and Mary's efforts and Don's support as well, who were all directors of the South Asia Institute prior to me, Don and Kamran, that is. I'm thrilled that the South Asia Institute has these sorts of joint endeavors in building archives in times like these when people, books, memories are dissipating into air. I can't imagine a more urgent need to actually record, make available our thoughts, and interact across continents in this manner. I'm just hoping that I can meet with all of you in person when we actually have a launch in person, perhaps, to celebrate the kinds of works that have preceded us and on whose shoulders we stand. So thank you, everyone. And I also apologize that I'll need to run off because I teach in 14 minutes. So thank you again. It's wonderful to be pulled into this project in this manner.
Thank you so much, Sharmila. Thank you. The next part of our program is called Reflections from Those Who Made the Digital Archive Possible. And the first person who will be speaking in this section is Seema Bakr, granddaughter of Syed Sajjad Zaheer, who has also been an independent consultant. I had the honor of meeting her a few years ago in Delhi. So Seema, it's lovely to have you here, and thank you for all your help and collaboration.
Thank you, Akbar Saab, and good morning and good evening to everybody, and all the times in between from wherever people are joining in. I'm going to also try and be as brief as possible so that we have the most amount of time for discussions. Actually, it should have been my mother who should have been doing this, but unfortunately we lost her last year. Basically, she was the main custodian of her parents' estate, and she was the GPA holder for it. And she and my father, Professor Ali Bakr, they were the ones who looked after the documents for all these years while we lived in JNU, thanks to the fact that she was a professor there. My parents, especially my father, was the one who used to make this material available to research scholars that used to come to us. But then once she retired and we moved towards one faraway part of the city, uh, for people to reach out to us also became difficult. And without him, for us to take out this material and make it available to people who were interested also became more difficult. And with time, my mother's health was also declining. So then we decided that we wanted to find a platform from where these materials could be taken care of and preserved and be accessible to people who could use them for research, for academic purposes, etc., and learning about that period. And we tried to look at many people. We even had conversations around it with the National Archives of India. But then finally, through Shurujit Sarkar, who also happens to be our neighbor, we were made this very beautiful offer of a digital archive, as well as help in finding a physical place ultimately for these materials. And we thought that was a great thing. And the digital archive also gave the prospect that we would, that the materials would be preserved for a much, much longer time than just the physical materials. So my mother signed the documents with AUD in 2015. And after that, it was quite a learning process. All of us, then slowly, Bilal put us in touch with Kamran Sahab, who then, through whom we got in touch with Mary. And then AUD and Texas came together for a larger collaboration in which my grandfather's papers became the first step. So that is how we got the whole process churning and started. And it has been a long journey, and it has been a journey in which we've learned a lot. And I am really happy that it has come to its fruition, and we have this website, and hopefully with time, we should also be able to add my grandmother's documents and papers to it as well, COVID permitting, as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Seema. Thank you. Our next speaker is Surajit Sarkar, Associate Professor, Center for Community Knowledge, Ambedkar University. Thank you for being with us, Surajit.
Hello, thank you. And nice to see all of you. Good day to you all. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Like Seema said earlier, we happen to be neighbors, which is how in somewhere around 2012 or 13, I discovered that Najma and Seema, between them in their house, were sitting on this complete treasure trove of papers, which they were wondering what to do with. And for some reason, the National Archives was not particularly getting very excited. They were playing the usual excited one moment and not so excited the next. So I said, in which case, if you don't mind, Ambedkar University is trying to kind of set up a kind of digital archive of various things. And as the Center for Community Knowledge, broadly speaking, I mean, that's my interpretation of community, is like marginal knowledge of different kinds. Though primarily we are focused on oral literatures, but it's like marginal. The Sajjad Zaheer papers would be of big value to people across the world. In fact, it was a surprise to me to know that they were still in someone's house and not actually available to the scholarly world. So partly that was why I kind of proposed the idea. They were game, and then we brought it up in the university, and university didn't ask too many questions. They said, okay, just go ahead. As long as you know what you're doing, go right ahead. I think 2015, I met Mary for the first time when she'd come to Delhi, and we kind of hatched up the plan of, okay, let's create the digital archive through the University of Texas, while in the process being kind of running this kind of independent, helping run this kind of independent center in which you have to raise the funds for everything. I said, if University of Texas is there, we'll finally manage to catalog all this material as well. And once we do that, then even future, having a physical archive will be a much simpler job. So thanks to the University of Texas, it's been 5 years to kind of bring us to where we are today. I think that there are lots of people who already quite been talking about using this archive in different ways, and I hope because it's digital, it kind of reaches not just them but people across the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Saraji. Our next speaker is Dhrita Bhattacharya Teto, who is affiliated with Dastan Media Communication. Thank you for being with us.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Oh,
hello.
yeah.
Okay. Hi. Good morning, good evening, whatever is the your time zone. So as Suru just mentioned, that National Archives of India. In fact, I got interested in this documents passed in 2010-11 when I actually got to know through Seema and Professor Najma Bakar that the archives were still there. As Suru has also said, one of the main reasons that we did not go forward with National Archives of India was that they wanted to take the entire document without any inventory. And I'm rather stressing on this word inventory because we found that it was really very important for us to have the entire collection in one list and understand to which direction we can proceed. But even then, nothing happened over some years. Then, thanks to Suru and Texas University, Mary and others, we finally started the inventory. And one thing that I would rather like to mention here, that one of the main reasons we wanted to do it, Seema and from Seema's family, was to make this entire archive available to the right kind of people. And here, I think this digital archive actually served the purpose, the initial thing that we thought of. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dhrita. The next speaker is Mary Rader, a dear friend and a colleague. All of us here at Texas deeply admire. And this project, this archive, at least as far as we are concerned, would not have happened without the pivotal involvement of Mary in it. So thank you, Mary, for doing everything that you have done and the ethical, sensitive way in which you brought all of us together. We are very, very indebted to you. So Mary, a few words. Thank you.
Thanks, Akbar. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to be bold and share. Can you all see my screen? Can anybody give me a thumbs up?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So thanks everybody for coming. I just really appreciate it. So I'm absolutely thrilled to be part of today's celebration and launch of the Sajjad Zaheer Digital Archive. As our lineup clearly shows, this was a huge undertaking that took concerted investment of multiple resources, time and money to be sure, but also resources of will, of patience, and of enthusiasm on the parts of many, many people. Thank you to our institutional partners, the Ambedkar University Delhi, UT's South Asia Institute, and the Center for Research Libraries for supporting us. Let me just move my slides. These are familiar pictures, I think, to Seema and Sajjad. As people hear me say often, collections like these don't just happen, people make them. As such, I'm delighted that today we're ensuring the investments people made to preserve, organize, and sustain the physical as well as the digital Zaheer archive. In particular, I want to commend and thank Seema, her mother Najma, Surjit, and Tato for all their work in maintaining the physical archive over the years, having had the vision to make it publicly and freely accessible, in facilitating lots of description, organization, and other logistics, and making it possible to retain the materials in India at AUD. My own involvement has been more with the digital side of the archive, and I want to take this opportunity to highlight the considerable behind-the-scenes work involved in making the digital collection. The immensely skilled and efficient G. Sundar and R. Prakash at Rojamutaya Research Library in Chennai oversaw the digitization of each and every item in the digital archive. They traveled to and from Delhi, carefully transporting the items from the Bakir home to the library labs in Chennai, and then back to AUD in Delhi. The thorough and professional work at RMRL created the beautifully clear versions you see online. Once the files were created, Maritza Lockhart undertook the laborious process of ingesting the materials into the CRL repository, thereby making them available on the web. Graduate students here at the University of Texas transformed these files into a cohesive and inspiring digital experience. Jonathan Seafelt, I see him on the call, so I'm so happy you're here, Jonathan. A PhD student in history here at UT, took the original hand list to the physical collection that Tato and his colleagues created, and then aligned it in the newly available digital files at CRL. Working with each item you see in the Excel spreadsheet, the bottom part of this screen, and including materials in English, in Hindi, and in Urdu, Jonathan created standardized, nuanced, and digitally searchable metadata so that researchers can effectively find archival items within the collection. I want to thank Jonathan for his tremendous and patient work to create access to the digital collection. Tato and Jonathan were able to describe the text-based items in the collection, but the photographs needed more help. Madeline Gobel, also on the call, at least she was, I mean, she has to go to a class, a master's student in information science here at UT, used the freely available Zooniverse platform to create opportunities to crowdsource metadata to identify the people and places represented in the photos. With the help of Akbar Haider, Mansi Bajaj, Namrata Kanchan, and Nishant Upadhyay, the photo identification site was translated into Hindi and into Urdu. Our hope is that with your help, we can more fully describe this collection, that we can begin to present it in and through the languages represented therein, something that we imagine Zaheer himself would have appreciated. In all of this, be it the physical archive in Delhi or the digital archive online, the intention all along has been to make these materials available as broadly as possible, thereby exposing the work and life of Sajjad Zaheer to new audiences. Educational institutions have contributed to this project because source materials are essential to the research process, and because research should ideally be free from geographic, national affiliation, or linguistic constraints. Beyond researcher access, my hope is that the archive will also be actively used in the classroom. Primary sources such as those found here will have profound impact on students in ways that secondhand readings about literary movements, political strife, or family life cannot. I just have to pause for a second because I love these images. They're both the kind of typical charming family life. So these like charming pictures of father and mother creating a child, and those of slightly bored family life. I imagine this is at IIC. It looks like IIC to me. It's a kind of bored family life, and that those that also suggest that this is not a typical family. Who gets a telegram saying, I've been released on bail, and thinks that that is kind of a absolutely normal family life, or who walks through the garden with Nehru. So I just kind of love these images that come straight from the archive. Finally, I'm delighted that new documents, namely the archival materials of Razia Sajjad Zaheer, an understudied but influential figure in her own right, have been brought to light through this project, and we can continue to think about more of her work going forward. As I said when I started, collections like these don't just happen, people make them. We could also add that collections like these don't just endure, people make that happen too. Library and archival collections are vibrant and alive when they are used. As such, I invite you to take time to log in, to search the collection, and to take some time to browse the images. Like me, I'm sure you will be both captivated and inspired. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you. In the last part of our program, 5 colleagues and scholars will reflect on the importance of the archive. And we will begin with Bilal Hashmi, who is Assistant Professor of Urdu teaching stream at the University of Toronto. Bilal is also a fine writer and very much present in our literature classes. So great to be here with you, Bilal. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me, friends, colleagues, teachers. Lovely to see you. I would have hoped for us to have met in person in less grim moments in history, but I hope that we're all keeping safe and well, and really my sentiments and feelings go out to everyone who is affected by the ongoing pandemic. I suppose I will need to be very brief, but something about the man himself, I think is quite important at this point. And so the question that many of you who are less familiar with Sajjad Zaheer and his times would be asking is why, why this archive? Why is it important? Who is this enigmatic, in some ways, very powerful, very much revered, sometimes feared and loved writer? I like to think of Sajjad Zaheer as a kind of prime mover where Urdu literature is concerned. He is a figure who is associated with the progressive writers movement, which was one of the great avant-garde experiments, I would call it, of the last century. And it's still very much active in pockets around the world, especially in South Asia. But really from the 1930s to the 1980s, this was the most important literary movement. And Sajjad Zaheer was at the sort of helm, so to speak. And so anything that brings his documents, his personal papers, correspondence especially, I think that's one of the great, really wonderful things about the collection. We get to see the people that were around this very instrumental figure, and what they wrote to him and what he wrote back. And in some cases, these manuscripts, I think, will add so much to our understanding of a writer who really had a very slim output. So one of the important things to keep in mind about Sajjad Zaheer is that he didn't write a whole lot. I mean, his published works are very few. I myself took a start in my sort of scholarly journey and as a translator by translating one of his works, a novella. But really, it's only about a handful of books that he published. But really, he is at the same time this link to larger movements. I will just name a few of them, and some of us are researching these now, and the archival materials will help us in that regard. Sajjad Zaheer is our connection to Dada and Surrealism, to the international left communist movements, to the Afro-Asian writers in the 50s and 60s and beyond. And so he has a reach that spans, again, as Akbar said, in the same way that this archive took shape across continents, I think his reach goes there across continents as well. I want to just sort of end my brief remarks by saying that really nothing quite like this exists for researchers of Urdu literature. So one of the things that I'm deeply excited about is how other writers' work will have light shed upon it through this. So I'm Rahi Masoom Raza, Qurratullah and Heather. All of these people feature within the archive in some capacity, who may or may not have been directly associated with the progressive writers movement or Sajjad Zaheer in any direct sort of literary influence kind of schematic. But we're still in conversation with him. So really this will be one of the great, I think, sources of information going forward. And one is deeply, profoundly grateful to the wonderful archival work that's been done. Seema, I'm seeing here after many years, and I remember back to when we met. The late Professor Najma Zaheer Baqir had welcomed me to your home, and we had talked about this not only in Delhi but also in London, and it's so wonderful to see this take shape. So again, my profound thanks and gratitude to all those who are involved, and I will end here. And I look forward to hearing other reactions. Thank you.
Thank you, Bilal. Thank you. Our next speaker is Salima Hashmi, an eminent artist and educator who has also been professor of art. Salima also happens to be the daughter of Faiz Ahmad Faiz, the great progressive poet Faiz Ahmad Faiz, and his companion, friend, and comrade Alice Faiz. So we are delighted to have you with us, Salima. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so privileged. I feel that, this opportunity to relive, even extremely briefly, for these few moments, those days of the Rawalpindi conspiracy case, because, that is how the time when I knew Banne Chacha, as we called him, Sajjad Zaheer. Those were the days of the Rawalpindi conspiracy case when 14 individuals were accused, tried, and sentenced for conspiring to overthrow the state of Pakistan, and it was high treason, and it was punishable by death. And I must have seen Banne Chacha before that, but my first memories of him are in Hyderabad jail, and where the trial was being held, because the trial was in camera. So a courtroom was built within the jail. And while we used to go and meet my father, which was in this sort of confines of this jail superintendent, it was at special occasions like Eid, when all the families of all the prisoners were allowed to mingle and meet in this big space where the courtroom was. And for us children of the prisoners, it was a joyous time, because not just because of the feast laid out, but the joy of meeting fathers, not in the confines of the jailer's room, but this was a big courtyard where we could hug and kiss and laugh to our heart's content, and where one met other mothers and fathers and other children who were our companions, as it were. But Banne Chacha, Sajjad Zaheer, had no visitors, no family. And my mother had already explained to us, to my sister, all of 4.5 years old, and myself about 8.5 years old, that he was our special uncle. He was our special Chacha because his family was far away, and they couldn't visit. And I remember this making me terribly sad or even tearful. I was that kind of a child. And I remember going up to him and slipping my hand into his. And it was very easy because he was so similar to my father. He had the same build, though he was taller, and he had sort of portly like him, the same demeanor, gentle and smiling, and really the same kind of presence. And so in those hours which we all had together, the 14 prisoners and their families, we became his family. And my mother took those precious moments away from chatting to my father and chatting to Banne Chacha. And although I was not a chatty child at all, believe me, I shyly answered the questions that you would put to me. And so a bond was formed, which was different from mine with the other prisoners. And we sort of, though everybody gave us pats on the head, and for those 2 or 3 days of Eid, when we were in Hyderabad, we would meet him every time. And there were several Eids that were spent because the trial dragged on for 2.5 years. And my mother took it upon herself to firm up this bond. And once we came home, she told us that he was a brave man like my father and a writer. And for a 10-year-old to unravel this information and squirrel it away in the emptiness of the space created by an absent father meant that he was special, like Abu, like my father. And then after 2.5 years, they were sentenced further, both of them 4.5 years. And I don't want to go into the details of how I learned of the sentencing of the prisoners. But, sometimes still painful. I become a 10.5-year-old again. But I do remember that my mother was happy that my father was being moved to Montgomery, which is very close to Lahore. So we'd be meeting him much oftener than we did when he was in Hyderabad, where it sometimes was only twice a year. But I still remember her angrily, saying that Banija had been banished to Much jail in Balochistan. And the worst jail in Pakistan, she kept saying, the worst jail in Pakistan. And I conjured up in my mind a dark place overrun by insects, which were my own terrors visualized. And so started my letter writing to Banija and addressed to Much jail. And because my mother explained that he couldn't really receive letters very often. And I don't know what those letters were like, but I know they were full of drawings of flowers and, myself and my sister and, and I'm sure that they amused him and probably relieved his tedium. And I got some responses too. I think I got 2 letters. They were rationed, of course, not allowed to write more than, twice a month. And in my myriads of papers, I think they're still there. Now, this is a motivation for me to do a real search in the mountains of papers that are in our house and find them. Finally, they were on this lined paper that prisoners had to use. And I would hear my mother discussing his incarceration with friends like Tahira Azdarelli. And they would wonder why he had been singled out for the very worst of treatment. And I remember in one of my letters my father wrote to my mother from Hyderabad jail, he writes about his own state of mind. He wrote this letter on the 15th of September, 1952. And he writes, most of one's time in prison is given not to work, but for a longing to work. Real, hard, exacting work that would stretch the nerves to the limit and make the mental nerves sweat with effort. Among the most consuming desires, constantly nagging at the mind, is the desire to return to work, any work which is fruitful and satisfying. And one can only assume that it was no different for Banne Chacha. Towering minds brought to a grinding standstill in his surroundings, which by all accounts were murderously uncomfortable. And then I remember many, many years later, when I was going through my father's papers, I found this manuscript. And it was written in Banne Chacha's hand. I handed it over to the family. Tiny, cramped writing. It was a child's notebook. I think it was a translation or a commentary on some classical text. And so one can imagine him laboriously filling up every little space in that time because paper was a luxury. And then before the sentences were fully served, only half served, the law under which the Rawalpindi conspiracy case prisoners was tried was declared null and void. Mm-hmm. And they were released. And Banija crossed over to India. And I met him only once after that. And the first Asian Writers Conference in Delhi, my father led the delegation from Pakistan. It must have been 55 or 56. And I hugged him shyly, very shyly, because I considered myself a young lady then, or of 12 years old. And he looked the same, but he was wearing dark glasses, still so handsome, and with the smile, still the same smile, and the benign, gentle presence. So one looks back and wonders at the steadfastness of the spirit and marvels at their abiding relevance. I mean, Faiz wrote, Chand ko gul kare to hum jane, you know, in the bright haven of our delight, it is no matter. They will not extinguish the moon nor the stars. So they stand like these archives of abiding relevance and a memorial to courage and hope for us all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Salima Saiba, for those beautiful, beautiful reflections. Thank you. Thank you. Our next speaker is Nagin Tanveer from Naya Theatre. She's the daughter of Habib Tanveer, a great artist who gave voice to many who did not have a voice, who spoke truth to power. So we welcome you, Nagin. Thank you.
I'm just going to jump in, and she was unable to connect up. We had some technical problems, so hopefully we can get her reflections at a later time and share them more broadly, but unfortunately the technology is not working.
Okay, thank you so much, Mary, for
Sure.
that. And next speaker is a speaker familiar to most of us. Again, a great scholar and writer, Professor Alok Rai, who taught English at the University of Delhi, son of Amrit Rai. We welcome you, Professor Rai.
You'll have to click unmute, Professor Rai.
Unmute. Okay, does that work?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay. Okay. Thank you for involving me in this event. I would like to say right at the outset that that an archive is a deeply civilized and civilizing institution. I'm always reminded in the presence of an archive of the fact that having a memory is the durable basis of having an identity at all, poignantly demonstrated by the disintegration that results when memory dwindles, as in Alzheimer's. And the question I want to ask, which is unfortunately only too relevant today, can whole societies develop Alzheimer's? We are a deeply amnesiac culture. We forget. There is not much tradition of remembering, of recording things. We are happier with myths rather than with actual archives. And it is for this reason that one is particularly grateful. I am particularly grateful that this Zaheer family archive has been put together. This is a particularly distinguished family, but I would say that family archives in general are valuable. This is a very distinguished family, and I mean no disrespect to Razia and Sajjad Zaheer when I say that they are only part of this parade of distinction. And if indeed this archive could be supplemented with papers relating to other parts of the Zaheer family, I think what we will get, in addition to one particular family, is a snapshot of a very significant element of the heartland elite, the elite of the UP, of the Awadh heartland, at a particularly sensitive cusp of history, in the moment of its ascendance, on the threshold of its disintegration. Sajjad Zaheer's own career, Salima has referred to the Rawalpindi conspiracy case. It was dramatic enough, but so I won't refer to that. But certainly he was a towering presence, and in the cultural work of the left in the post-independence period. And this is a part of the history of which I have some personal experience. And I can recall what seems barely imaginable now. The cultural confidence of that moment, the sense of being the heralds of an imminent future. Salima referred to the Afro-Asian Writers' Conference. I happened to be there. Again, not as a delegate, only as a precocious youngster. But I still remember the feeling that, that the world belonged to us. It didn't, of course. We were wrong. And this cultural moment gets simplified and glamorized in the memory of a child. This was, in fact, a deeply fraught moment. And I would, as a scholar, say that it would be good if this archive, as it develops, encompasses, links up with other archives that would enhance it in the direction of the cultural politics of the time. Because the inherent paradoxes of the left cultural movement of the post-independence period, which of course is part of the prehistory of the moment in which we find ourselves today, unfortunately. So there's one source that suggests itself immediately to me in this context of archives which are in some sense parallel, relevant, and so on, and that is the Joshi archive at the JNU, the archive of P.C. Joshi at JNU, which would be a good thing to link up. And if indeed, though the physical collections cannot come together, if the digital collections come together, it will be very valuable indeed. So finally, I suppose, I'd like to, basically remark on the fact that all archives, and as scholars, all of us know that archives always offer unexpected delights. And so I want to refer in passing, and finally, to one particular delightful moment that I experienced in a very brief journey into the archive. And this was my Ronald Reagan postcard, this is item number 512113, English postcard E/0296, which purported to come from Ronald Reagan. Now, I thought Ronald Reagan, even for someone as well connected as Bande Bhai, was stretching it a bit. I didn't really think that was possible. It turned out, of course, that this was an English postcard which was addressed to Ronald Reagan. And this was, in fact, asking Ronald Reagan to release Angela Davis. So again, an important sort of snapshot of a time that seems to belong to an entirely different history now. So thank you very much for involving me in this event. I'm glad, grateful, and hope to make use of the archive in times to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Rai. What a delight it is to hear you speak, and thank you for your suggestions. Thank you. Our next speaker and the last speaker for this session is Kamran Azdarelli, Professor of Anthropology. And I think those of us who are here and who have worked even a little bit with this archive know how much work Kamran has put in. Sajjad Zaheer was a bridge builder in so many ways, but bringing these archives together, cultivating this archive also took a lot of time and a great deal of investment, and Kamran has been instrumental in that. So thank you, Kamran, for your leadership, and we would love to hear a few words from you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Akbar. First, welcome everyone. This is such an amazing moment, and tears of joy, or whatever you may call it. First, I want to just mention some of the prehistory of what we are celebrating today. Bilal Hashmi, who's a friend and who I've known for some years, sort of approached us in 2013 or 2014 that he had been in touch with Seema Sahiba and her mother, Najma Sahiba, and that if we could sort of think about a certain kind of collaboration. And of course, as Akbar, you rightly mentioned, on all such projects and more, our person to go is our friend and colleague Mary Rader, who primarily, and you, I came to you as we all talked, and she said yes. And the next time she was in Delhi, she visited the family, and it just from there onwards. And then, of course, Dennis, we had met before. Ambedkar was a university that we were anyway talking, in discussion with for collaboration. And so thank you for all the colleagues, and Dennis especially, but other colleagues at Ambedkar, the Sajjad Zaheer family, Najma Sahiba, Seema Sahiba. I'm so, yeah, it's a great loss that Najma Sahiba could not see the the fruition of the initiative that started with her. So thank you, everyone. I mean, all has been said, and I suppose people who are attending know the importance of Sajjad Zaheer, not only for progressive writers movement, not only for his the notoriously important and amazing collection of short stories, Angare, that Mahmooda Zafar Sahib and Rashid Jahan Sahiba and Ahmed Ali Sahib and Sajjad Zaheer Sahib put together in the early 30s. It had the distinction of being censored and banned by the colonial government. And his wonderfully naughty short story, Jannat Ki Basharat, that still is an amazing, important contribution to our literature. And then, of course, as Bilal mentioned, his novel, but later on, actually, in the 50s, and I have a copy of it and I can show it to you, he also wrote something, Zikr Hafiz, which was a very important text of criticism, in which he also takes some of the more progressive people like Zoe Ansari and everyone to task, and basically, so it's an amazing literary journey. Of course, Bilal is right, not as much, because he was also a political man, not only in charge of various publications during the war period until the 47-48, but a senior member of Communist Party of India, which he had joined in the mid-30s after coming back from London, and was close in the inner circle of Nehru's Allahabad kitchen cabinet in 1935-36, but was in 1948 designated to come to Pakistan and become the first Secretary General of the Communist Party of Pakistan. I'll read something here very briefly, that not to bore you all with details about his life, because we will have, as Mary said, more, how should I say, now of course I've lost it, a more formal gathering in which we will talk more extensively about his contribution, whether in the literary field, in the field of progressive, internationally, how progressive movements and literary movements came together, especially the Afro-Asia movement and in the 50s and 60s, but also his political work. I wanted to say a little bit about his time in Pakistan, and not from, excuse me, not from a political point of view, but from what I think Salima Sahiba has suggested and others have suggested, and Akbar, you were saying, a person who had extensive networks, and as Professor Alok Rai was also saying, a certain representation of a period, but also of Ashraf family from Lucknow, but him also, excuse me, trying to connect with a range of people, and in a way, he and Razia Sajjad Zaheer Sahiba, and she may be more than him, being part of that legacy, but yet moving away from that legacy and becoming much more involved with a range of people from different classes and different and different parts of India and different parts of the world. Actually, I have something, I don't know if I can share it, which is, I can share things. Let me see. Well, here, this is from Qawmi Jang, from 1942, and this is one of his articles. And then this is the Zikr-e Hafiz, which is the first edition that I'm showing to you. Maybe I'll share something else. Yes, this is what I wanted to share. And is it visible to people? Should I increase the size? I don't know what to do. People can see this?
Yes.
Yeah.
We can see it.
So this is from Qawmi Jang, which was the Communist Party newspaper in Urdu, which he was editing, and had a whole group of people who later on, Sibte Hassan was working there, Cover Muhammad Ashraf, KM Ashraf, another very important person whose archives are in partly in India and partly in Berlin, that we, Mary and I are talking about, someone whom we have also forgotten. But this is a poem on Lenin's birthday, which is written in the Purbi form, right? And it basically says that, you don't read it while sitting on a sofa in a drawing room, but you have to sing it. And it has this Purbi dialect, and which is sort of, people like Sunjakta and others who work on IPTA. This is the kind of work that was being done. And the print is so small that I don't know, is there a way to, maybe I can increase the size. Is there a way to increase the size so I can even read it? But if you read the first verse, Mulke Roos mein bhaiya, anyway, I can't, I don't have my specs, so I can't read it, but karke dikhais wo kaam. It's a very much interesting, and I like the Purbi dialect because, of course, a lot of people have heard me so much, so this is a redundant joke, but parts of my ancestors came from not Purab of UP, but at least from Bihar, which also has Purbi dialect. If I have a few minutes more, I'll just have to say that, coming to Pakistan was also a very interesting way in which the initial years were spent, which a lot of people, especially in India, or who know his life, know most of his work either during the war period from the 30s onwards, and after 55, 56, when he returned to India, which again is a very interesting story, and how that was sort of facilitated on both sides of the border. Khaja Ahmad Abbas has a very interesting anecdote about him going to Nehru and asking for helping Sajjad Zaheer Saab come because his mother was ill and he had just been released. And but after the creation of Pakistan, a number of educated Muslim men from Zaheer's social background had opted for Pakistan and found themselves in important government jobs. A more detailed study is necessary to show the way in which class linkages trumped political allegiances, at least in the initial years of Pakistan's existence, to provide people like Zaheer and other communists the protection they needed in years in the underground. For example, we know now that if we take Zaheer's first few months in Pakistan, they were spent with friends and relatives who were very much part of various kinds of government machinery, which they were ostensibly hiding from. So in May 48, Zaheer arrives in Pakistan from India and remains underground till March or April of 51, when he was arrested in the Rawalpindi conspiracy case. And in between, he also visits different parts of Pakistan. So, initially his alias was Muhammad Ahmad, and he stayed with Zakarullah Khan, Zakkan, who is alias Zakkan. He was an engineer in Karachi, and also first cousin of Nawazada Mahmud Zafar of Rampur. And of course, Kamil Khan Mumtaz's father, the architect then he was also this brother-in-law, Zakarullah Khan Sahab was also the brother-in-law of Dr. Z.A. Ahmed, the communist leader from India, who of course was W.Z. Ahmed's brother, who stayed back in India and was married to Hajra Sahiba, who was Zakarullah Khan's wife. So all this very interesting networks that you see. Of course, Z.A. Ahmed was not from UP. And and then Zakarullah Khan brought him to Shaukat Ali Khan's house, who was an overseer in the Public Works Department in Karachi and the brother of Dr. K.M. Ashraf. Of course, I just mentioned Ashraf Saab. Then he went to Sayyid Imdad Hussein's house, who was superintendent of police of Sindh province and was the brother of Razia Sajjad Zaheer Sahiba, whose family still lives there. And we have, and another brother who was in Lahore, Sayyid Sajjad Hassan, who was in the railways, again, Razia Sajjad Zaheer Sahiba's brother. I can go on and show all the kinds of ways in a certain whole world had moved, and because of various kinds of relationship, including Zafar Omar's son, you know, the Neeli Chhatriwale, where actually were also friends from Amritsar. And Salima Sahiba would, and all of you know the story that, you know, Faiz was teaching there, Tasir Saab was teaching there. Zafar Umar had, they had an establishment there, a certain kind of a company. They all met there, Rashid Jahan, Mahmoud Zafar, and I suppose these were the connections as well through which Faiz Saab met Ali Sahiba in Amritsar in the late 30s. So it's a very interesting network that also shows a human side of a lot of people that we know. And I just wanted to, I mean, there's so much work to be done on all aspects, on these personal lives, on the literary side, the political side, the way these worlds were formed through all these kinds of connections. But I think again, there's much more to say. I hope we will have a more formal gathering in which we will, you know, a lot of us will contribute and talk about not only the importance, but you know, I mean, definitely the importance, but also the treasures that are in this archive. I'll end again, and this Mary has spoken, Seema Sahiba have spoken, others have, on Razia Sajjad Zaheer. I think if you look into the archives, but otherwise as well, a very important, but I'm sorry to say, a forgotten figure in our history of literature, of translation, of political activism. She was there for not only Zaheer Saab throughout his captivity, but even after that, I think her own work, I mean, she was from Ajmer, her father was a principal there, and married young, maybe at the age of 20, but was a comrade throughout. Actually, there is a quote that she has which was published soon, which was published in one of the letters that were published in the 70s, that, you know, tum aur Faiz कभी पीछे मुड़ के देखो तो मैं और एलिस भी कुछ कदम पीछे ही चल रही हैं. And that kind of thing, you know, you and Faiz, if you look behind, Alice and I are right there behind you. But this idea that the selflessness of their work, I mean, there are letters in this archive, if you go through it, I mean, it also shows the kind of economic and social problems that a family like theirs went through, raising children, not having, Sajjad Saab not having the kind of, you know, employment that would have that sort of that would give him a monthly income, and his travels and his commitments. Whereas in Lucknow and then in Delhi, but especially in Lucknow, Razia Sajjad Zaheer Sahiba holding a job as a college professor, but also doing translations, writing literary works, and really without her the household would not function. Literally, without her, the household wouldn't function. And there are actually some letters which are also, you know, complained because he said, oh, if you're such, why don't you like Upinder Nath Ashk's or Yashpal's wife, why don't you open a publishing house? And she writes back, but I'm working, and I'm also a literary figure. They don't, I mean, they don't have the kinds of commitments of looking after the household that I do. And you say that I should open a publishing house like Ashk and Yashpal's wife. I mean, it's a very angry but a loving letter. And there are lots of letters like this. And constantly the letters are about her and them talking about the economic worries and the financial problems. And there are layers to it. And some of you know the history better than I do. And so this is her work, and and a commemoration of her, amazing translation of Galileo. There's a whole, which is here in the archives. There's another long piece on Mijaz, which she was writing, a very loving and caring biography. Then there is a sort of manuscript here on Mijaz. So, but apart from that, she published novels, short story. Akbar and others know the famous short story Niche that she published. That's part of her oeuvre. So again, I'm going on and on, but I really wanted to make a plug about Razia Sajjad Zaheer, and this archive helps us start that work. Thank you very much. Thank you again, everyone.
Thank you so much, Kamran, and thank you for reminding us about the richness of this archive, and of course, also drawing our attention to the role of Razia Sajjad Zaheer Sahiba, who was very much a part of all the major steps that Sajjad Zaheer took. So thank you for that. Now we have a few minutes for questions, and I am just here taking your questions, but I'm sure Mary is in the best position to answer them. So Mary, I'm putting you on the front line, and I just want to close my part with a line from Faiz Sahab's Subh Azadi, just a simple line in which he says, Chale chalo ke wo manzil abhi nahi aayi. Let's keep marching, for we have not reached that destination yet. And this is the march that we are celebrating, and all of those people who have contributed to this, those who are with us, and those who have departed from our world. We thank them for making our lives better. So Mary, it's all yours now. Thank you.
Thank you, Akbar.
It's not all mine, it's all ours. So if anyone would like to ask a question or make a comment or something, please, if you're unable to unmute yourself, just use the raise hand function. Gail.
Yes, I would like to thank you very much for this program, and I apologize because I was interrupted in the middle by a guy who came to inspect my roof. Talking about maintaining the household. But it's wonderful to see Salima. We met in Lahore many years ago, and I'm a big fan of your father's poetry, who isn't? And I am just so delighted that this particular important archive is being preserved so that people may do the research online, the sorts of things that younger researchers could do that those of us who've waded through piles of dusty papers would welcome. In any case, this particular effort also shows that there's so much more that can be done in terms of finding archives and preserving stuff and making it available in ways that will not destroy the papers while you are actually reading them. So speaking as a historian, rather than a literary person, I am delighted about this important archive, and I hope that it will be used by lots of people, and I hope that other archives will also be found, and the example of this will be an inspiration for others.
Thank you.
Thanks, Barry.
If I can quickly jump in.
Please.
Is that okay? Delighted to see this initiative, and one of you mentioned the inventory of the collection, and the Indian National Archive was mentioned. I was told the National Archive has Mulk Raj Anand's papers, 88 boxes that were delivered. And I saw that they are just there in 12 cupboards without any listing, any kind of archiving, and nobody can access them. So I'm just so delighted to see that this archive is being made available for scholarship, a transnational scholarship. Many of us cannot travel between these countries, and therefore a connected intellectual history is almost impossible. I just want to say, those of you who are interested, so Sajjad, Zaheer, Mulk Raj Anand, Faiz Ahmed Faiz appear in a journal called Lotus. And in the pages, and the Lenin page, Kamran, you showed, there is a Lenin special issue in Lotus where Sajjad Zaheer is writing, and his poems on Patrice Lumumba is kind of being illustrated by a drawing from Vietnam. So there is a kind of strange mix of solidarity, a montage being generated, and it's so rich. So I'm very happy to see this initiative, and like Professor Mino noted, that I hope more of this will be done between the two countries for what it's worth. And also just one line, this was very, very affirming, this conversation, particularly in the times we find ourselves in today. So thank you very much to the whole team, and good luck in all your initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Are there people from Seema Saba, apart from you, people from your family who would like to speak? Are there?
Yes, there are some people from the family who are here, who I saw. From the
I mean, he's a legacy for all of us, but
So yes, and as Professor Rai said, that it is a very, very rich family, and not only Nana and Nani's papers are of value, but of Nana's parents and his siblings and many of his niece and nephews. So if anyone from the family would like to comment, I think we'll all be very happy to hear.
But your mother's archives would be, hopefully we could work with if there is more there, right? Not your mother, your grandmother's, your Nani.
My grandma, my mother, you would have to.
No, I know. Of course, I misspoke. I apologize. Yeah.
Yes, and yes, when we signed the understanding with AUD before Texas came on board, which it joined in, it was with an understanding to preserve both Nanas as well as Nanis, both my grandparents' materials. So. And we were actually going to start that work, but due to my mother's failing health initially, and then COVID, that work has been put on hold, and we're just now waiting for the situation to improve enough, because that basically the first part of the work, which, as Tato had also mentioned, is the inventory, and which is a very physical and laborious work, actually got done at the house. So that would involve people coming into the house for a lengthy period of time and going through the material at length. So we will have to wait for this pandemic period to come to some kind of, I can't say it'll go away, but some kind of normalcy, the new normalcy as we are all expecting it to be. Then we can pick up this work again and hopefully start it. We are all waiting for that time to come.
Thank you, Seema.
Thank you.
Okay, on that note, it would be great for us to end. Again, thank you, everybody. Hope you stay safe and hope you have a wonderful time exploring this mine of history, literature, aesthetics. And thank you again for everybody who has joined us, and take care. Khuda Hafiz. Goodbye.
Khuda Hafiz.
Thank you. Khuda Hafiz.
Khuda Hafiz.